Okay, now let's talk about Chapter 10, meiosis. So, previously we talked about this, what it means for an organism to be diploid and to have two copies of each chromosome. These two copies of each chromosome are what are known as, they're described as being homologous. So the pair of 14 chromosomes, they are homologous. The pair of 15, they are homologous, etc. And when we say they're homologous, what it means is that the pair, they have the same genes on them. So there'll be a series of genes along this chromosome, and along the chromosome, they have the same genes. Now, that does not mean that they have the exact same form of those genes, because on one of the homologs, for example, you might have a dominant form of a gene, whereas on the other homolog you might have a recessive. They are the same gene, they're the A gene in this case, but you can have different forms. Those different forms are known as alleles. And we will be reminded when we talk about Mendel that you can have dominant alleles and you can have recessive alleles, and there's other permutations, but those are sort of the main types. So here we have a homologous pair. One is blue, one is red. One is the paternal copy, that is the copy you inherited, say, from your dad. And the red is the maternal copy, the one you got from your mom. They are a homologous pair. They have the same genes. Again, they may or may not have the same forms of genes. And along that chromosome, there may be some cases where they do have the same, but other genes where they're different. Okay, it all depends. Okay, so here in the middle, we're seeing those duplicated chromosomes after the S phase, in which now each chromosome consists of two chromatids. And so these two chromatids here are exact copies of each other. They will have the exact same form of each gene, and the same with the red one. Okay, so in mitosis, you'll remember that during metaphase, each of those duplicated chromosomes lined up along the center of the cell. Okay, well, we're going to see in meiosis that things are a little different, in that after those chromosomes are duplicated, and they consist of two chromatids, we'll see that in meiosis, during what's called the first division, they don't all line up along the center, but they line up as homologous pairs. And so after anaphase of meiosis, we'll see that the homologous pairs are separated, not the chromatids, so that after the first division, you'll notice we started with 4 chromosomes. Here we have 4 chromosomes, 4 duplicated chromosomes, but after the first division, we have a cell that has 2 chromosomes and another with 2. The first division of meiosis is sometimes referred to as the reduction division, because we're going from being diploid to haploid. Now there's a second division in meiosis where these two cells split into 2 themselves, thus resulting in 4, and they are also haploid. Now here you'll notice that the chromatids have been separated. We end up with 4 haploid cells at the end of meiosis. This process of meiosis is happening in a specific spot in your body, basically in the gonads, or the reproductive organs, the ovaries in females and the testes in males. And you notice all this other stuff on this diagram, which we don't need to concern ourselves with, but this diagram is showing all of the glands in your body, or the vast majority of them, and essentially your reproductive organs are glands as well, which means they basically produce hormones. Okay. Now, so in mitosis, those two cells we produce are clones of each other, but as we'll see here in meiosis, that's not the case. Those 4 cells we produce, those gametes, are going to be all different from each other. And that's going to result in the genetic variation that you see with sexual reproduction, as opposed to asexual reproduction where you produce clones. So that's key difference. Sexual reproduction, we're producing variation among the offspring because of the process of meiosis. So here's something that happens during meiosis 1, that first division, and that is we have the red chromosome here consisting of 2 chromatids. You can see they're really right next to each other, and here's the blue chromosome consisting of 2 chromatids. And what happens in meiosis 1 is those 2 duplicated chromosomes, the 2 homologous chromosomes, get together and pair up, and they do a process called crossing over. Okay, and what happens in crossing over is they exchange pieces of DNA. So again, the red one I think was representing the maternal gene, and the blue was the paternal. So what happens after crossing over is that you end up with chromosomes that are mixtures of maternal and paternal genes. So the first and the third one, you'll notice in them crossing over has occurred, and they've essentially exchanged pieces of DNA. This process we refer to as genetic recombination. We're mixing up or exchanging pieces of DNA. We could also refer to these 2 chromosomes as being recombinant. They have recombined the genome of the genes that you've inherited from mom and dad in the process of making gametes. So think of it this way. You essentially inherit chromosomes from your parents. And what you do when you're having kids is you take those, you sort of mix them up. They exchange pieces so that what you're passing on to your offspring is often a chromosome that is essentially a mixture of your mom and dad. We inherit chromosomes that essentially are mixtures of our grandparents' genes. And again, meiosis is what does this. Now, another part of meiosis that can generate genetic variation is what's known as independent assortment. And with independent assortment, so remember that during meiosis 1, the homologous pairs get together, and that's when crossing over occurs. But the way they line up during that meiosis 1 can differ. You can get a situation where you get all paternal ones on one side and all maternal on the other side, and essentially all possible combinations. So for any given cell that's going through meiosis, you might get this combination, or you might get this, or you might get this, etc. You can get essentially all these possible combinations. And so you notice with this simple scenario here where we just have these 6 chromosomes, we essentially get 8 possible combinations. Which leads us to this. What are the possible combinations? Well, it depends on the number of chromosomes you have. The formula here you'll see is 2 to the n being the haploid number. So in an organism that has 6 chromosomes, you'll notice again they have 8 possible combinations. Well, we have 46 chromosomes total, a haploid number of 23, so you'll notice 2 to the 23rd is a very large number, over 8 million possible combinations when those chromosomes line up during meiosis 1. And again, that's just in one of the parents. Now, during sexual reproduction, you have a gamete from mom and a gamete from dad that get together in the process of fertilization to form a zygote, which is essentially a fertilized egg. And so you'll have the gamete from mom, the gamete from dad getting together, and when you've got over 8 million possible combinations from dad and over 8 million possible combinations from mom, essentially, and I'll let you do the calculation, you have that many possible combinations. You square that number, and it's greater than 70 trillion, I believe, possible combinations. So that is why offspring of two parents are all different from each other, like these pups here. In theory, it's possible that two offspring could be genetically identical. I guess I'm not talking about identical twins here, because identical twins are identical because they come from a single fertilization event. But when you have siblings that are not the result of being twins, identical twins, it's in theory possible for them to be genetically identical, but practically it's virtually impossible because there's so many possible combinations that could be formed. And this number doesn't take into account crossing over. Crossing over increases the possible combinations even more so that again, two siblings, it's virtually impossible for them to be identical. Okay, we'll do the other sections in the next video.